Did you know that your greatest enemy is inside you? It is your own mind, if it has not been trained. A mind that repeats poverty, failure, guilt, and comparison every single day. And then wonders why life never changes. And if you do not wake up to this, your mind will keep turning you into a puppet, pulling your fears, controlling your decisions, limiting your steps, and sabotaging the future you say you want to build. Proverbs revealed this truth long before modern psychology ever started talking about mindset. Whatever dominates your thoughts begins to control your paths. So listen carefully. Either you master your mind with wisdom, or your mind will train your life to repeat the same failures. Because if you do not master your mind masters you. In this video, you are going to understand why so many people want to prosper, but remain trapped in the same cycles. They want to win, but they think like defeated people. They want to grow, but they feed thoughts of fear. They want wealth, but they carry a scarcity mindset. They want a new life, but they keep obeying the same old thoughts. And maybe this is one of the hardest truths to accept. Many people are not stuck because they lack potential. They are stuck because their mind has not yet been trained to sustain the next level. Because look, you may have desire, you may have dreams, you may have faith, you may have good intentions, you may even be praying for open doors. But if on the inside, your mind is still uncontrolled, confused, anxious, impulsive, and full of negative inner voices, you will walk into new opportunities with old thoughts, and old thoughts tend to recreate old lives. A person changes jobs, changes cities, changes relationships, changes their routine for a few days, but still carries the same scarcity mindset, the same insecurity, the same lack of discipline, the same comparison, and the same fear of winning. The Bible says in Proverbs 23:7, "For as he thinks in his heart, so is he." This text reveals a deep law. What happens inside you does not stay only inside you. Sooner or later, your thoughts become words, your words become decisions, your decisions become habits, and your habits begin to build your destiny. That is why a mind dominated by fear produces small decisions. A mind dominated by comparison produces frustration. A mind dominated by scarcity produces survival-based actions. But a mind dominated by wisdom begins to produce direction, self-control, clarity, consistency, and real growth. And that is why Proverbs does not speak only about money, work, discipline, prosperity, and success. Proverbs speaks about wisdom, prudence, self-control, correction, understanding, counsel, the heart, and the path. Because before a person changes their life, they must change the way they interpret life. Before changing the result, they must correct the source. Before winning on the outside, they must win on the inside. There is no solid prosperity sustained by a weak, impulsive, and unprotected mind. There may even be a momentary breakthrough, but then the person goes back to the same repeated cycles because they never trained the thoughts that govern their decisions. So, if you feel like you work hard but do not move forward, start things but never finish them, dream big but sabotage yourself, want to prosper but live trapped by fear, this video is for you. If you feel like your life is stuck, your mind is always tired, your thoughts pull you down, and there is a silent war happening inside you, stay until the end. Because today you are going to see invisible patterns that may have been controlling your mind for years. And when you learn to identify what dominates you on the inside, you begin to recover direction on the outside. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel, because here we use the wisdom of Proverbs to understand the patterns that govern decisions, prosperity, success, and real growth. And write in the comments, "I will train my mind to win." This is not just a beautiful phrase. It is a decision. It is like saying, "I will no longer let my thoughts govern my life without filter, without correction, and without wisdom." Because a trained mind is not born by accident. It begins the moment you decide to stop obeying everything you feel and start submitting to the wisdom that can rebuild you from the inside. A mind without direction turns effort into frustration. There are people who wake up every day tired before they even get out of bed, not because they have no strength, not because they have no ability, not because they have no potential, but because their mind already starts the day without direction. The person opens their eyes, and before thinking with clarity, they are already attacked by anxiety, bills, fear, comparison, insecurity, and that heavy feeling of a stuck life. And look, this happens to many good people, hard-working people, people who want to prosper, people who desire to win, but who live reacting to the world as if they were always putting out fires. The problem is that when the mind is not trained, effort turns into frustration because the person may be moving, but they do not know exactly where they are going. And a mind without direction can turn even good intentions into repeated cycles of exhaustion, discouragement, and stagnation. It is like someone trying to drive a powerful car on a busy road, but with several hands pulling the steering wheel at the same time. One hand is fear saying, "You are not going to make it." Another is scarcity saying, "This is not for people like you." Another is comparison whispering, "Look how everyone else is ahead." And another is impulse shouting, "Just give up, just buy it, just answer back, just run away." Do you see it? The person has an engine, has fuel, has a road, has a dream, has the desire to grow, but lacks mastery over the mind. They lack clarity, they lack focus, they lack a mindset trained to decide with wisdom instead of obeying every emotion that shows up. And this is where Proverbs begins to touch on a deep point, because Proverbs 4:23 says, "To guard your heart above all else, because from it flow the springs of life." In biblical language, this heart is not just a beautiful feeling. It is not merely emotion. It is the inner center of a person where thoughts, decisions, desires, intentions, and the direction of life are born. So if the source is contaminated by negative thoughts, fear, mental confusion, self-sabotage, and negative inner voices, the path also begins to become contaminated. That is why many people try to change their money, change their job, change their appearance, change their environment, but continue taking the same uncontrolled mind everywhere. And when the mind remains without correction, the person changes the scenery, but repeats the same invisible patterns. The first change, then, is to stop treating thoughts as if they were innocent things. A repeated thought becomes a pattern. A repeated pattern becomes a behavior, and a repeated behavior begins to draw a person's destiny. That is why, before running around trying to fix everything on the outside, you need to stop and ask, what is trying to control my mind today? Is it fear, anxiety, mental laziness, a scarcity mindset, anger, impulse? Because whoever does not identify the thought that dominates them cannot overcome the behavior that destroys them. And maybe this is exactly where true mental training begins. Not when you change everything all at once, but when you learn to watch the door of your mind before anything walks in and makes decisions for you. Thoughts of scarcity prevent actions of prosperity. Many people say they want prosperity, they want success, they want growth, they want a better life, but they keep thinking as if there will never be enough. They receive money and immediately feel afraid of losing it. They think about investing in themselves, and soon that inner voice comes saying it is not going to work. They see an opportunity, and before even analyzing it with clarity, the scarcity mindset already responds, "This is not for you." And the most dangerous thing is that this kind of thought looks like prudence, looks like caution, looks like reality. But many times it is just fear dressed as wisdom. The person does not realize that a scarcity mindset does not only describe a stuck life, it begins to create decisions that keep the person trapped in that same stagnation. When the mind has been trained for years in survival, it begins to distrust any possibility of progress. The person may even want to win, but inside they already expect things to go wrong. They want to grow, but they make small decisions. They want to move forward, but live preparing for defeat. It is like someone who has lived in a dark room for so long that when the light comes in, their eyes hurt. Sometimes prosperity is not scary because it is impossible. It is scary because it requires a new mind, a trained mind, a strong mind, a wise mind, a mind capable of thinking before acting and acting with prudence. And my friend, without this change of mindset, the person may even earn more, but will continue living as if they are going to lose everything tomorrow. Proverbs 21:5 says that the plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty. Look how deep this is. Proverbs does not connect prosperity with desperation, nor with impulse, nor with luck. It connects prosperity with planning, diligence, discipline, decision, and direction. Abundance is not born from a desperate mind. It is born from a mind organized by wisdom. That is why it is no use for a person to want to prosper while negative thoughts command every choice, because an uncontrolled mind spends to relieve anxiety, gives up out of fear, compares itself out of insecurity, and loses consistency because of a lack of self-control. An aligned life begins when thoughts stop being governed by scarcity and start being corrected by the ancient wisdom of Proverbs. So instead of saying, "There is never anything left," start asking, "What can I organize better?" Instead of repeating, "I do not have the conditions," ask, "What is the first possible step with what I have today?" Instead of declaring, "I will never get out of this," say, "I will correct what needs to be corrected, one decision at a time." This is not empty positive thinking. This is mental training. It is reprogramming thoughts, protecting the mind, breaking patterns, and building a new mindset of stewardship, responsibility, and growth. Because prosperity begins when your mind stops merely surviving and learns how to build. But there is another silent enemy that can steal your consistency before you even realize it. Comparison poisons the mind and destroys consistency. One of the greatest mental prisons of our generation is comparison. A person wakes up, grabs their phone, sees someone traveling, someone buying a house, someone showing success, someone appearing prosperous, someone seeming happy all the time, and without realizing it begins to despise their own journey. They look at the display window of other people's lives and compare it with the backstage of their own pain. They see other people's results, but they did not see the process. They did not see the years of discipline. They did not see the tears. They did not see the losses. They did not see the hidden price behind that beautiful image. And when the mind starts living in that comparison, it loses focus, loses clarity, loses direction, and begins to call its own life a failure just because it is still under construction. The problem is that comparison takes your mind off the path and puts your mind in the audience. You stop building and start watching. You stop obeying wisdom and start obeying pressure. You stop thinking with prudence and start making decisions to prove something to people who are not even truly watching you. That is when many people buy what they cannot afford, try to appear to be what they are not yet, abandon good habits because results did not come fast enough, and enter repeated cycles of anxiety, frustration, and self-sabotage. The comparative mind never rests because there is always someone who appears to be further ahead, richer, more attractive, more recognized, or more successful. Proverbs 14:30 says that a heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. Look at the strength of that image. Comparison does not only steal joy, it drains energy, weakens discipline, contaminates thoughts, and rots motivation from the inside. A mind dominated by comparison cannot see the small doors God has already opened because it is too busy looking at other people's doors. And the person begins to lose gratitude, loses consistency, loses self-control, and often even loses the discernment to understand that not every path that looks beautiful on the outside is the right path on the inside. Not every displayed prosperity is prosperity built with wisdom. That is why your mind needs to be trained to look less to the side and more toward the direction. The question is not, why is he ahead? The question is, what do I need to correct today? The question is not, why is my life not like his? The question is, what wisdom is missing in me so I can advance on my own path? Comparison is like driving while looking at the speedometer of the car next to you. The more you look to the side, the greater the risk of leaving the road. And maybe you are not late. Maybe you are simply being called to stop running other people's race, because there is another danger that is born precisely when a person stops governing their thoughts and starts obeying the first impulse that appears. Impulsive thoughts create decisions that destroy the future. Many people are not trapped because they lack potential. They are trapped because of impulsive decisions. They feel anger and speak. They feel desire and buy. They feel tired and quit. They feel fear and step back. They feel immediate pleasure and sacrifice the future they say they want to build. And then, after some time, they look at their own life and ask, why am I still in the same place? But many times, the answer is hard, because an untrained mind always chooses quick relief instead of deep construction. Impulse seems small in the beginning, but it charges a high price later. It is that purchase that seemed harmless but turned into debt. It is that harsh response that seemed like just venting but destroyed a relationship. It is that procrastination that seemed like rest but became a lack of consistency. It is that decision made in the heat of emotion that seemed like courage but was only mental confusion. When the mind does not have self-control, any feeling becomes a commander, and the person begins to confuse desire with direction, craving with wisdom, haste with opportunity, and emotion with truth. Proverbs 25:28 says that a person without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. That image is extremely powerful because a city without walls does not choose who enters. Any enemy invades, any attack causes damage, any pressure breaks in. That is what an uncontrolled mind is like. Without protection, without a filter, without discernment, without self-control. The person may even have big dreams, may talk about prosperity, success, and growth. But if they do not learn to govern emotions, protect the mind, and control thoughts, they will continue handing the steering wheel of their life to passing impulses. The adjustment begins when you create space between thought and action. Before answering, breathe. Before buying, wait. Before quitting, pray and analyze. Before deciding, ask, is this leading me toward the future I say I want? If the answer is no, maybe that thought is not direction. Maybe it is sabotage dressed as urgency. Because self-control is not the absence of desire, it is inner leadership. It is when your mind learns that not every desire deserves to govern your decision. And when this begins to happen, you discover that even your words need to be trained, because many people are losing the war because of what they repeat every single day. Repeated words train the mind to win or lose. Many people speak against their own life every single day and do not even realize that they are training their mind to lose. The person wakes up and already says, I cannot take this anymore. They try something new and say, I never succeed. They look at money and declare, my life never changes. They make a mistake and repeat, that is just how I am. It seems like just venting. Just a phrase thrown into the air, but repeated words begin to create tracks inside the mindset. And then the person wonders why their thoughts always return to the same place of fear, scarcity, insecurity, and defeat. The mind listens to repetition. What you say many times begins to feel true, even when it is not. If you repeat incapacity, you begin to run away from opportunities. If you repeat failure, you begin to act like someone who has already lost before even trying. If you repeat fear, you begin to obey fear as if it were counsel. And here comes a gentle confrontation. You cannot want a strong mind while feeding your mind weak phrases every day. You cannot want to win on the inside if you keep using your own mouth to reinforce negative thoughts, self-sabotage, and limiting beliefs. Proverbs 18:21 says that death and life are in the power of the tongue. This does not mean that words are magic, as if one loose phrase changed everything without discipline, without decision, and without action. It means that words have direction. They reveal what is in the heart, reinforce what dominates the mind, and lead behavior. Words of defeat train the mind to expect defeat. Words of wisdom train the mind to decide with wisdom. That is why a prudent person does not speak carelessly about themselves, because they understand that the tongue can weaken or strengthen their own journey. So start changing the tracks. Instead of saying, "I cannot do it," say, "I am still learning." Instead of saying, "My life is stuck," say, "I will correct what needs to be corrected." Instead of saying, "Money is not for me," say, "I will learn how to handle prosperity with wisdom, discipline, and self-control." This is renewing the mind through the right repetition. This is protecting your mind from mental laziness, scarcity, and confusion. Because you cannot train your mind to win while speaking like someone who has already accepted defeat. But there is something even deeper. It is not enough to change the words if the mind keeps being fed with any kind of content. The mind must be fed with wisdom, not just information. We live in a time when everyone knows a little bit about everything, but few people know what to do with what they know. A person watches videos, reads quotes, consumes news, follows opinions, listens to debates, sees content about prosperity, success, discipline, mindset, self-control, but remains with a stuck life. And why? Because information without direction does not strengthen the mind. Many times, it only increases mental confusion. The mind becomes full, but it does not become strong. It becomes noisy, but it does not become wise. It becomes busy, but it is not trained to win. Not everything that enters your mind feeds your growth. Some things enter as entertainment, but leave draining your peace. Some conversations seem normal, but reinforce fear, comparison, scarcity, and discouragement. Some content seems harmless, but trains your mind for distraction, anxiety, impulse, and mental laziness. It is like feeding the body with bad food every day and then wondering why you have no energy. The mind also needs food. And if you feed your mind with emotional junk, noise, complaining, and negative inner voices, do not be surprised when your thoughts begin to weaken your decisions. Proverbs 4:7 says that wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom. Do you see the difference? Proverbs does not tell us merely to accumulate information. It points to wisdom, understanding, prudence, instruction, correction, and discernment. Information shows facts, but wisdom shows the way. Information fills the head, but wisdom corrects the direction. Information may even impress others, but wisdom changes behavior. A mind dominated by wisdom learns to filter what it hears, what it sees, what it repeats, what it accepts, and what it allows to take root inside the heart. So start asking sincerely, what am I allowing to train my mind every day? What content do you consume before going to sleep? What conversations do you allow to shape your mindset? What voices do you listen to when you are weak? What thoughts do you feed when no one is watching? One practical step is to replace part of automatic consumption with reading, reflection, prayer, planning, and real learning. The mind is like a garden. If you do not intentionally plant wisdom, weeds grow by themselves. Anxiety grows by itself. Fear grows by itself. Distraction grows by itself. But a wise mind needs to be planted, watered, and protected, because at the next level, it is not enough to think better. You must transform thought into action. Thought without action becomes fantasy. Trained thought becomes construction. Some people think that training the mind is only about thinking positively, repeating beautiful phrases, and imagining a better life. But Proverbs goes deeper. It is not enough to think about prosperity if you keep running from discipline. It is not enough to imagine success if you do not create consistency. It is not enough to desire growth if you do not change behaviors, correct destructive habits, and make decisions with wisdom. Thought without action becomes fantasy, but trained thought becomes construction. Many people use the mind to dream, but they do not use the mind to plan. They use the mind to desire, but they do not use the mind to decide. They use the mind to imagine a better future, but they do not use the mind to endure the process necessary to get there. And here is the point. A winning mind is not the one that only visualizes victory. It is the one that learns to organize small steps every day. Because winning on the inside begins when your thoughts stop being just intention and start becoming direction, decision, focus, and practice. Proverbs 14:23 says that in all labor there is profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. This is direct, simple, and powerful. The wisdom of Proverbs does not teach a passive mind that only waits for things to happen. It teaches a practical, diligent, prudent, and responsible mind. A mind dominated by wisdom asks, what is the next right action? If you think about prospering, what financial habit needs to change? If you think about winning, what discipline needs to begin? If you think about growing, what decision do you need to make today? If you think about leaving stagnation, what behavior do you need to abandon now? A mind full of dreams without action is like a shelf full of seeds that were never planted. There is potential, there is promise, there is possibility, but the fruit does not appear because the seed never entered the soil. The seed only reveals its strength when it faces the process, when it receives care, when it remains long enough to take root. The same is true with you. Your thoughts need to leave imagination and enter practice. And when the mind learns to transform wisdom into small, consistent, real action, the person begins to realize that winning is not a distant event. It is a daily construction that begins inside but must appear on the outside. Practical steps to train the mind and prosper. Now let me bring this very close to your life, because a trained mind is not born from a moment of emotion. It is born from practice, repetition, correction, and applied wisdom. The first step is to identify which thought dominates your decisions the most today. Ask honestly, what is controlling my mind? Is it fear, anxiety, scarcity, comparison, insecurity, discouragement? Because as long as you do not name the dominant thought, it continues to govern in silence, like an invisible boss giving orders inside your head without asking permission. The second step is to question destructive thoughts, because not every thought that appears in your mind deserves to be obeyed. Sometimes what you call truth is only an old trauma, a mental habit, a negative voice, repeated fear, or a limiting belief. When the thought comes, I will never win, stop and ask, is this wisdom or is fear speaking? When the thought comes, my life is stuck and nothing changes, ask, is this direction or is discouragement trying to paralyze me? A strong mind does not believe everything it feels. A wise mind examines, corrects, filters, and chooses what will remain. The third step is to replace lies with wisdom. And this is where Proverbs becomes a powerful tool to renew the mind. When the mind says, act quickly, Proverbs teaches prudence. When the mind says, give up, Proverbs teaches diligence. When the mind says, spend to relieve anxiety, Proverbs teaches self-control. When the mind says, speak without thinking, Proverbs teaches self-control. When the mind says, you have no direction, the wisdom of Proverbs begins to align thoughts, correct paths, and train decisions so that your life is not guided by impulse, but by understanding. And the fourth step is to transform correct thought into small action, because thought without practice becomes only a beautiful intention. Control your words, protect what enters your mind, create space between emotion and decision, pray before acting, think before responding, plan before spending, choose better before repeating the same mistake. Do not try to change everything in one day. Start with one obedient decision today. A trained mind is formed by the repetition of wisdom, until discipline becomes identity, until self-control becomes strength, until the winning thought stops being a phrase and becomes the way you live. And when that begins to happen, the person no longer merely tries to win. They begin to become someone prepared to win. Your mind needs to be trained to win, because an untrained mind can turn talent into waste, opportunity into fear, money into lack of control, dreams into frustration, and effort into exhaustion. And maybe you have already felt this in your own life. You make an effort, try to change, start over, make plans, promise that now things will be different, but when pressure comes, the same old thoughts begin pulling you back into the same old behaviors. And here is the point. There is no use wanting a new life if your mind continues to be fed by the same fears, the same limiting beliefs, the same comparison, the same anxiety, and the same scarcity mindset. Proverbs reveals that a person's life is not built only by what they desire, but by what they think, speak, decide, and repeat. What you feed on the inside begins to show up on the outside. That is why guarding the mind, correcting thoughts, controlling words, and acting with wisdom is not a small thing. It is the beginning of a new life. A mind trained by wisdom learns not to believe every negative inner voice. It learns not to obey every impulse. It learns not to make decisions in the heat of emotion. It learns to protect the heart, choose thoughts, develop discipline, act with prudence, and build prosperity with direction. You do not need to be a slave to anxiety. You do not need to obey every thought of fear. You do not need to live dominated by comparison. You do not need to remain trapped in the same invisible patterns, but you need to decide, because no one wins by accident. No one builds a strong mind without repetition, correction, instruction, and self-control. So the question is, what will you allow to govern your mind from today on? Fear or wisdom? Scarcity or direction? Impulse or self-control? Mental confusion or clarity? Either you train your mind with wisdom, or your mind will continue training your life to repeat the same results. Master your mind, or it will master you. If this video spoke to you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments, "I will master my mind with wisdom." And share this video with someone who needs to stop being controlled by their own thoughts and start winning with wisdom. Because maybe that person is one decision away from beginning to recover control of their own life.